What is up, UK Property School? Rob here again with another education video. Really common question here from people looking to get started. How do I start in property without money? Really common question, and also one of the main mental blocks that prevents people from ever getting started in property. People think that property is just reserved for people that are already rich, people who already have money. Let's debunk that myth. So let's take my story as an example. I'll do a full overview of my own story in another video talking about my turning point and how I discovered property. But for this, let's just focus on the point at which I started in property. I started with no money and no savings, and here's how I did it, and here's how you can too. I realized that property was the vehicle that I wanted to use to change my life. So I started going to networking events and being around people that were active in property, asking questions and learning from experienced investors. I found out what these people needed, and then I offered to solve those problems. So instead of waiting for money, I did anything that I could do to be of value, and I was able to learn what worked for these investors while I was doing that. So I did viewings, I found deals, I managed small refurb projects, and I did all of this for a fee. I even used to run to the tool shops and the hardwares to get supplies. Bit by bit, the fees stacked up until I built up a pot. Once I had the first deposit, I bought my first buy-to-let. I did a couple of upgrades, a light refurb, I added a bit of value, and then I refinanced. So I pulled out some equity and I used that money along with the new rental income to buy another. And I kept scaling just by doing the same thing, rinse and repeat, gradually building it up. This is a great way to start, and anybody can do it, but it is slow and it does require you to sacrifice time in order to do these tasks. Now, it's definitely worthwhile. I went from knowing zero to having a full apprenticeship in property, seeing multiple investors in action and multiple deals play out all before I bought my own. That experience is invaluable. That said, there are also faster ways to do it. So here are some of those to think about. House hacking. So in the UK, there is something called the Rent a Room scheme. You can earn up to £7,500 per year tax-free by letting out furnished accommodation in your main home. So if you have a spare bedroom, a garage you can convert, an extra living space that could work as a bedroom, this is a quick, easy way to set up some extra income towards a deposit. Next is a JV or a joint venture. This is where you partner with somebody who is time poor but who has the money. You strike a deal where you find the deal and manage the refurb, they bring the cash, you buy it together and split the profit. Or similar, work with private investors that aren't interested in owning property, but they want the returns. So they invest with you and loan you the money. You use that to buy a property and then you pay that investor back at a set return on their money as a profit. It's passive for them. You deliver the profit. They don't have the hassle of finding and buying and refurbing the property, but you get to keep the property at the end. The next is rent to rent, or rental arbitrage as it's often called. And this has been really big in recent years, but be careful. This is where you find the landlord that has a property that they rent out, but they're tired of the hassle of doing that. So you offer to take the property on, to maintain it, to fix any of the issues, to deal with the tenants, and in return, you will pay them a fixed rent for X number of months or years. You then rent the property out to a tenant at a higher price than the rent that you're paying, and you use that rent to pay the original landlord, and you keep the profit in between. Now, it's important to note here that this can be risky because unless you're using the flat differently, for example, service accommodation or changing it to a HMO in order to make more profit, then your margins are going to be really tight. And if you do switch to service accommodation or HMO, you have to pay for the licensing and also pay for any of the changes in order to make them compliant. These strategies are generally more labor intensive. They've got a higher occupancy turnover, and that means that there is a higher risk of void periods there where you're not making any money, but you still have to pay that rent to the original landlord. Also, many times with service accommodation and HMO, bills are included with your tenants. And so, for example, if energy costs shoot up, you have to absorb that cost. That's particularly valid at the moment. Finally, there are lease options. Now, these don't work in Scotland because the Scottish Law Society won't abide them. So this is only valid if you invest outside of Scotland. In the instance of a lease option, you find the owner who is looking to sell and you negotiate a price that you both agree on, but that you can buy later in the future. Meantime, you agree that you'll make monthly payments for the use of the property and you rent the property out. Similar to rent in that way. You get the monthly cash flow just like rent to rent, but in this instance, within the agreement, you have the option to buy that property later on within the agreed time period. So if you're stuck thinking that you need a big lump sum to start, rethink that. You can start with your time, your effort, and your ability to solve problems. There is more detail to all of these strategies that we've listed. Really, each of them could be an entire video of their own. So drop me a message if you want any more detail on any one of them in particular. But I hope this was of use, guys. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.